Hi, everybody. This is Dr. Blevins with Enilda Clinic at enildaclinic.com. I'm super excited to introduce my new interviewee, my expert interviewee today. She is a psychologist all the way from Georgia, which if you guys didn't know, that's where I did my grad school training. And she is Dr. Rubia Subhani. Thank you for being here, Dr. Subhani.
Thank you for having me.
Where are you in Georgia?
I am in Columbus, which is about maybe about 2 hours southwest of Atlanta. It's on the Alabama border, and we are a big military town. We have Fort Benning, which I think is the second biggest Army base in the U.S.
I love it. I'm actually from Alabama, for everybody out there that didn't know, and so I just love everything about your location right now.
It's so warm.
It is really warm. Yeah. I have to say that I like Pacific Northwest weather a little bit better for my hair. It helps my hair. If I were in Alabama right now, my hair would be curled up to like here.
Yeah, this is my frizzy look. Usually it's curly, but when it gets humid or just starts like Monica in that Friends episode when they went to Hawaii.
Yeah. Is it ever not humid down there?
Maybe 5 days out of the year.
You get 5 good hair days. That's it.
Yeah, I use a lot of conditioner.
Oh, yeah. Okay, so today we are going to talk about autism and mindfulness. I was so excited whenever I just kind of, internet bumped into Dr. Subhani and found out that she specializes in this sort of niche that she created on this pathway through her training and then her practice. And so let me tell you a little bit about her before we dive in and start asking her all kinds of questions. So do you want me to call you Rubia or Dr. Subhani?
Rubia is fine.
Okay. Everybody has their different preferences. And I like to treat women with as much respect as I treat men who use their titles. So I always ask first, everybody. Okay, so Rubia is a licensed psychologist and certified mindfulness teacher. She began her career as a neuropsychologist and then had a spiritual epiphany in 2013, which led to a complete change in her personal and professional life. Rubia became immersed in mindfulness and found such a deep sense of peace and inner joy that she wanted to share it with others. So she retrained in multiple evidence-based mindfulness programs to teach mindfulness to other families with neurodiverse children. She couldn't find any one program which met her needs as a professional and parent of an autistic child, so she created her own. This program is called Mindful Village, and it combines mindfulness, self-compassion, positive psychology, and neuroscience. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Okay, so tell me, what is Mindful Village?
Okay, so basically what happened was you kind of gave the synopsis, but I had trained in autism, like specialized in autism as a subspecialty of pediatric neuropsychology. And then I had my own child with autism, which was rather ironic, but I always tell everybody, at least I knew what to do. And so when he was young, around 4 or 5, I started using mindfulness with him a lot. And it really worked well. He became so grounded and so calm and was able to do the practices, the mindful movements, doing little meditations, and everything went pretty well until around the time when he was 10. This was about, I think, 8 years ago. Yeah, it was 8 years ago. And we had a lot of life changes going on then. And that's where I was talking about the spiritual journey, because I went through a divorce. So he went through a lot of changes, like he changed schools 3 times. We moved houses 3 times. He hit puberty. Dad was out of the picture, and he just had a lot of difficulties dealing with that and had a lot of behavioral challenges. And so everything that I had been taught in a traditional learning was, behavioral and all that kind of stuff, it didn't work as well anymore. And the mindful stuff that he had been doing so well, he kind of just lost it. And so I was at my wit's end. There was a lot of going on in our house. We were, constantly challenging each other, and it was really difficult. And I thought, maybe if I can't change his behavior, I should change my own, like the way I'm reacting to him. So I went on my own journey, my personal mindfulness journey, and I did training in different mindfulness programs, and first I started off with just doing retreats and doing teaching for myself. And the training that I did, learning through others, the spiritual retreats I went on, all of those had such an impact on me. And I realized that I was changing. My behavior to my child was so much more calmer, relaxed. I had more patience. I was able to step out of that automatic thinking. I was able to self-regulate better. I had more self-compassion for myself as a parent. And as I went through this journey, I was like, this is what parents of neurodiverse kids need, because this is how you deal with the challenges that you are faced with day in and day out. I mean, we don't get to leave our work at home. When you have a child with a neurodiverse challenge, you are there for them 24 hours a day, right? So I was so touched by what I had gone through in my own journey. I had found such an inner sense of peace and joy and just happiness that I wanted to find a way to teach other parents how to get there too. And so I retrained in all these programs, and I was looking for something that not only taught you how to be mindful, but also taught parents how to have self-compassion and gave them a sense of joy, a sense of optimism for the future, some hope, something that wasn't always about just get through the moment, but look forward to something and have that sense of waking up in the morning with a smile on your face. And so the programs I learned from were all wonderful programs. I mean, don't get me wrong. I thought each program that I've done the training in has been phenomenal in its own way, but I didn't find one that had all the components I wanted. So that's why I came up with the idea to just create my own. And I'm very heavily science-based, through my graduate training and postdoc training and everything. I'm always very much aware that we need to have evidence to back up what we're saying. And I don't want to teach parents something that they can't look up and find out that it has a ton of research behind it to back it up. So that's where the neuroscience part comes in. And so I decided to create my own. I took bits and pieces of programs that I had learned, and I took research from other areas like positive psychology and practices which I thought would lead to a well-rounded person, a parent who was happy, optimistic, and had the tools necessary to deal with challenges as they come up. So that's how the program developed.
I love that so much. I in my private practice here in Washington State, I feel like that's kind of what I have found is the pathway to supporting a child. You have to nourish and support the parent. That parent has got to find that inner sense of calm and that anchor and that hope, so that from that point they can have the energy to do interventions with their kid, or they can model for their child resiliency and coping with difficult emotions. Because if the parent isn't able to do those things, the child oftentimes flounders. So I love that. I love it, love it, love it.
That's exactly. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Well, I was wondering, I practice ACT to do that. So I'm trained in ABA and ACT, Applied Behavior Analysis and Acceptance and Commitment Therapy. I'm betting that you learned a bit about ACT as you were creating your program.
Actually, I didn't.
You didn't? Okay. Well, a lot of what you're saying sounds so much like ACT. And so that's so interesting to me. So tell me about the types of strategies that you did learn about that helped you to create your program.
So so just to address your point, I had actually, when I was in my normal practice or typical practice, I didn't do a lot of therapy. I did mostly testing, 90% testing, and then 10% was mostly behavioral, behavioral plans, behavioral training. And I did teach parents some mindful techniques that I had picked up for my son. But like you said, what was missing in my piece was that I had never done mindfulness for myself. I had always done it for my son. And until you address the parent issue, I mean, the parents have as many issues as the kids do, honestly, because of the challenges that you have to deal with as a parent are so much, they take up so much time and they're so stressful. And so until you address the parent, you can't really address the child. And I think that's where I learned from my own journey that this is where I had messed up. I should have done it for me to start with. So I was modeling it for him, and that was calmer.
I kind of think it comes down to the definition of how you're thinking about the problem, right? Whenever I have parents call me and they're describing the problem, it's interesting to me because parents can take a few different types of perspectives on the problem. And so I know that I'm not going to be an effective provider for every single family, because I'm not a provider who takes the child into the clinic room without the parent and does play with only the child and supports that child into developing rapport with me, and I can get that child to do anything that I need them to do, and then they go home with the parent, and there's not a ton of generalization there, and so the parent is still experiencing a lot of distress. I'm a different kind of clinician, so I'm gonna bring that parent in there, and I actually want to see that parent's distress along with the child's distress, because they live together. And then you don't get the whole picture unless you see both people's distress, or all three or all four people's distress inside that home. And I think that it's interesting that sometimes whenever a parent is calling for services, they identify the problem as one person's problem, whenever there might be three or four, even five people who are a part of that situation. And so I think it's almost like a compassionate point of view to say, like, we're all a part of this. We all are taking ownership of the problem, and we recognize that it's going to support this individual who might have neurodiverse, patterns to their behavior and thinking, but we are all a part of this family. And so I'm just so excited to hear more about how you're doing this. How do you sell this to a parent whenever, I mean, I guess, are you calling them, or are you doing it on the internet?
So what happened was, let me just say that what you said was 100% on the mark. I think it's a family issue, and I think people can't see the forest for the trees because they're so immersed in it. And so
Some parents will just say no and hang up.
kudos to you for making sure that you're addressing the whole issue. I think that's wonderful. I have what I started to do was to teach components of the program. I actually have been doing it over this last year, so I think they've all been online. So I've been doing mindfulness classes. I'll do like mindfulness and self-compassion. I'll do one on mindful communication, just the different modules in the program. There's 6 modules in the program.
Okay.
So I've done like classes based on all of the modules, just to make sure that there is a need, first of all, and that what I'm teaching is resonating. And so based on the feedback I've gotten, I've reorganized or figured out what are the pain points of the parents that are in these situations. What do they need from me? And how can I get them to where I am now versus where I was 8 years ago? So the things that have come up over and over again are just the basic tenets of mindfulness, just to learn to be aware. And I teach them activities that they can do with their kids, teaching them mindfulness techniques, but also like mindful activities like eating. Mindful eating is such a wonderful thing to do together as a family. Teaching them how to help their kids breathe, like to take a breathing break when there's a tantrum coming up or something, if the child is old enough, and you can both take deep breaths together, like hold hands, and you can even have your child when they're not in a tantrum, you can have the child put their hand on their tummy and feel their tummy rise and fall with the deep breaths. And so they can remember to do that when they're in the middle of a tantrum. If you do a lot of these practices before things escalate, then sometimes you can bring it down by the kid. If your child remembers, sometimes it just, go, from 1 to 10 and 2.5 seconds, and it's too late. But sometimes before things escalate, you can say, remember your breathing. And so mindfulness is one of the main things I teach, just basic mindfulness. Second is self-compassion, because the program I've have based my self-compassion protocol on is the Mindful Self-Compassion program by Dr. Kristen Neff and Dr. Chris Germer. And they teach, one of the things they teach is for families, is for a parent, I guess it's for anybody, but I teach it to parents, is to take a self-compassion break. If you are in the middle of a stressful situation and you have the opportunity to take 5 minutes, you take a quick break, and what you do, it has 3 components. You do First one is to just name it, like I am under a lot of stress, I am in so much pain. The second is to remind yourself that it's shared humanity versus isolation. So remind yourself that you're not the only one in the world going through this. You're not alone. Universal suffering is everywhere. It's not, it's not just you. And then the third part is to be kind to yourself. So say, may I accept myself just as I am? May I be strong? It's just a few 5 minutes. It's like a 5-minute self-compassion break is what they call it. And it's amazing. It's amazing how much just taking out 5 minutes before things get to the point where you've both lost it makes such a huge difference in the way you come back to the situation, and you're now responding instead of reacting. And you've calmed down the rhetoric, you've toned down the way you're expressing yourself, and it just makes a huge difference in the relationship.
Self-compassion, I have found, is fundamental with every client I've worked with. If they can learn to give themselves self-compassion, then they can do anything for their child.
Yeah.
But if you can't extend that love to yourself, it is so hard to show patience or whatever else you might want to be able to do for your child.
Yeah, I think a lot of also parents with neurodiverse kids have a lot of like guilt and blame. And I've noticed that in a lot of the parents that I've worked with, it's like, am I doing something wrong with my child? Or because why don't I have more patience? Or they just don't give themselves enough compassion, that they're going through extenuating circumstances. They deal with things that parents of neurotypical children may not deal with. And to give themselves that little extra grace and to say, it's okay to feel this way, because this is your life, but you don't have to, you can do some practices that help you get to a better place. It doesn't have to be like this. And just to give them that hope.
Yes, and hope is so vital. And I'm hoping I hope for all the parents out there who are watching this. Sometimes I feel like whenever I talk about mindfulness, sometimes parents have like this sense of it being like, oh, and they are looking at their children who are, bouncing on the couch and running around the house and pulling the cat's tail. And they're like, my kid is never going to sit there and go, oh, you know what I mean? Like they might have this sense of the goal is so discrepant from where their life is presently that it feels hopeless. And so can you talk a little bit more about that change process for those parents who might feel like it's a big change for their family?
Yeah, sure. I actually had that happen with several parents that came in because they were very skeptical about how can I use this with my child, or even if I don't have time for myself. And so one of the things that I point out over and over again is that when you start doing this, even if you just do 5 minutes a day, it makes a huge difference in your own reactions to your child. And you're also at the same time modeling that for your child. You're modeling that calm collectedness, that peaceful demeanor. You're not stressed. I mean, kids pick up on your stress. You can't fool kids, right?
Yep.
Dogs and kids, you can't fool them. So they pick up on your tension, your stress level. And if you're always keyed up and uptight, that energy is picked up by your child. But if you're doing the practices, if you're just doing 5 minutes a day, and also tell parents, you don't have to do a sitting meditation every day. There are lots of different ways to be mindful. You can do a walking meditation. You can just use mindfulness in an activity such as eating, or even like brushing teeth. When you're brushing your teeth, I can go through each step of how you would implement mindfulness in any kind of daily activity. And if you do those kind of things, your kids can model those kind of things. They don't have to learn how to sit for 10 minutes and go home, because you're not going to get like a child with ADHD who is probably not going to be able to sit for 10 minutes and do that. But could he do mindfulness while he's brushing his teeth? Could he use mindfulness while he's eating? That's a definite possibility. So making that shift for them to see that mindfulness doesn't necessarily mean a sitting meditation, but it can be incorporated into so many different areas of their life. And that's what you can use to introduce it to your child.
what specific outcomes might a parent notice once their child is, more successful with integrating mindfulness into their daily life? Let's say if that child has ADHD or autism. I'm trying to think of other types of neurodiversity where the parent might be looking for this.
I think that the thing that most the parents that I've worked with have seen is their child is calmer and takes, if they've taught their child things like breathing, then their child is learning to breathe. When they start to get uptight, they start breathing. When I was starting to teach my son about it, I actually would, before he was up, like when he was in a calm state, I would teach him that when I set the timer for the bell, like, like a meditation bell, when you hear the bell, I want you to take 5 deep breaths.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he would start to get upset, I would ring the bell.
Mm-hmm.
And he was so used to doing it on other times that even if he was upset, he would take the time to take 5 deep breaths. Mm-hmm. And so I've taught parents that if you can teach them the tools that they need to calm themselves down before they get uptight and get out, like past the point of no recall, if they can retain that, which is sometimes hard, but the more you do it, the more it comes naturally. So when the kids start learning to pause before they react, and they start taking deep breaths when they're getting upset. One day, this is kind of funny. I've been teaching my child how to do mindful eating, and I was just modeling it for him. I wasn't forcing him to do it. I just wanted him to see what it looks like for mommy to be doing it and how calm it makes me and how happy I am. And one day he came up and he was like, so, you've been telling me about the mindful eating. And I was like, yeah. And he said, I think I want to try it. And I was so excited. I was like, yes, sure. I would love for you to try it. Mm-hmm. And he said, okay, so can I have 10 Oreos to try it now? I was like, okay, thanks. Thank you for keeping me grounded and not letting my head get too big, that all my work was paying off. And I was like, okay, so back to the modeling again. But yeah, so when they start, I think kids pick up on things, and when they realize that you're once stressed out, uptight parent that was yelling at you every time there was an argument has now calmed down and doesn't react, that also tones down his reaction. And then they start picking up things, especially if they're younger when you start it. Like, I think if I had done mindfulness for myself when my child was young, I would have had a completely different outcome. Mm-hmm. But on the other hand, I probably wouldn't have developed this program maybe. So everything happens for a reason, I guess.
It does. Yeah. I love that. One of the underlying things that I see for you. So in my online work, I try to put out these educational videos. I have a Facebook group, and for everybody out there, it's called Positive Parenting Q&A. It's on Facebook. And I try to focus on values and helping families to reflect on their individually identified values and how that is linked to their everyday behaviors, so that they can just be more intentional about the behaviors they choose, so that they are feeling like they're living inside their values. Mm-hmm. And something that I'm noticing is that as you engage inside something like mindful eating, or taking 5 deep breaths as you're starting to get frustrated, as you model that for your child, you're actually creating this inner dialogue for him where he's taking on this ownership of a value that, I stay calm, I relax myself rather than getting frustrated and blowing up. And that kind of internal language for children is vital, because it's them telling themselves who they are. So it starts by the parent, right, saying who they are, or the parent giving, reflections and descriptions and praises to the child as the child does that new activity, that mindfulness activity, and the child then takes ownership of it. And so this is literally how we instill values into our children. And so I think that if we have any parents out there who are still sitting there saying, I don't know why I would want to spend this much effort or time on doing mindfulness, well, it might be aligned to your values. It might be the fact that if your kid gets frustrated easily or is so hyperactive, they, run into the dog more times than what you'd like, or whatever it might be, then it might be that you're trying to shape your child's inner language so that they're taking ownership of different types of values that you'd have for them. Like, I'm a careful kid, I'm a thoughtful kid, I'm a relaxed kid, whatever it might be, you know? Love it.
That's wonderful. Yeah. No, that's a really great point. You're right. Because I think what we model as parents is what kids pick up. And when you're yelling and screaming at your child, what is he learning from that? Right. And it's not, you're both stressed out and it's not going anywhere. And it's
He's learning those values, right? I mean,
exactly.
values, but one of the things with ADHD kids that we know is that by the time they're 9 or 10 years old, they've received far more criticisms than other children. And so what that means is that they have heard, not just from parents, but from teachers, coaches, also, that they their character is associated, or their behavior is associated with things in society that are negative, with things that their parents dislike, their peers dislike, their teachers dislike. They themselves have been associated with that far more than other people around them. And so by 9 or 10, we start seeing anxiety and depression in kids with ADHD more often than kids without ADHD. And so I think that this mindfulness that you're given very concrete instruction on it, right? Which I think is very
Yes.
helpful for parents.
Yes.
And I think that's another big, big vital reason for doing it, because you're changing that inner dialogue again for children who are at much higher risk for other mental health difficulties as they're growing up, because you're helping the parent to instill the language of, they're worthy, they're awesome, they have all these different abilities. It might be harder for them, but they have them, they have them.
And also, I think you're giving these children some tools
Mhm.
to how do you, I mean, the kids are frustrated. Like my son said to me so many times, I don't know why I get angry. I don't know how to control it. Or I don't know why I get anxious. And I'm like, well, if you're giving them the tools, teach them how to do it. Because here's another thing. A lot of these children they need therapy, but they can't do therapy very well. They don't know how to verbalize. They don't feel comfortable verbalizing. They have a difficulty making connection with the therapist to even be able to open up. And so these kids were the kids that were falling through the cracks for me when I was doing my assessments, because I would do the assessment and I would give the parents the recommendations, and most of them were related to school. But then there were some kids that were just fell through the cracks, right? Some kids needed play therapy that were younger. Some kids needed behavioral therapy, but then there are kids who need therapy, but you don't know where they can go because they don't do well with typical talk therapy. And so if you teach them, mindfulness, it teaches them how to ground themselves. It teaches them how to breathe on their own and how to use the practices of mindfulness and self-compassion to give themselves the comfort they need that they can't get from anywhere else. And that to me has been one of the biggest aha moments in the whole mindfulness journey, is that this is what kids say. Can't, don't, or won't, or whatever with talk therapy. This is what they can use.
That's what you and I have both, we just met last week, but
like forever.
we're on parallel professional lives. I mean, your life is very different than my life. I don't have a kid with autism. I don't have any kids, but I don't have a kid with autism, and it's different. But at the same time, I think we both had this realization, right? That there's this subset of children who can't benefit from the traditional forms of therapy that are already out there.
Exactly.
And I think figuring out that the key is that you go through the parent. The parent becomes the therapist. You train the parent to be the therapist.
Mm-hmm.
And doing that, the child will blossom. Yeah, it's just amazing. So amazing. And I think parents really like it because, like you said at the beginning, it decreases the stress of the parent as well.
The whole energy level in the house changes.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're not in that constantly stressful environment.
Mm-hmm.
It becomes one of peace and calm. And I mean, of course, the kids are going to have tantrums, they're kids. But definitely the way you manage it, the length that it lasts will steadily start to decrease. You know, you'll notice the changes over time that, oh, we're not in a screaming match for 10 minutes anymore. Now it's 5 minutes. And as a child absorbs more and more of the practices that you are modeling and teaching, and I am going to actually do a program geared towards the kids later this year, but I wanted to make sure that the parents had the basics first, because this is where I went wrong, and I don't want everybody else to go through the same thing. I want them to know that if the parent learns it first and models it, and then they can teach to the children, and then it'll be easier for them to pick up. They can't do it on their own. They need you modeling it for them. They need the parents modeling it and doing it with them. But yeah, I think it's a life changer for so many kids that have, I did one of the trainings I did was with a program. There's a psychologist in Netherlands who's developed a program specifically for parents and children. And hers was geared towards kids with ADHD, but she did later some more research with kids with autism. But I went and trained in her program because I was fascinated. I thought that was the answer to what I wanted, which it was a phenomenal program. But her program was geared specifically towards the whole parent-child interaction and teaching them all the mindful stuff. So that one was a great program. So there are people out there doing it. There are people that, professionals that recognize the value of doing the entire parent-child interaction and using that as the therapeutic tool.
Yeah, for sure.
I think we have some way to go.
Yeah, I think it's not a model that is, popularly used, I would say.
It's not really mainstream, right? I think it's therapists here and there do it, but it's not like the traditional gold standard of therapy with children that have neurodiverse challenges, which should be, I think.
I 100% agree.
Yeah.
100%. And I think it's sad because, like I said, sometimes I have parents who call and they have an idea of what they want therapy to look like for their child. And I mean, sometimes it just takes a little bit of psychoeducation and kind of describing what's out there. And then the parent's like, yes, sign me up. But sometimes they don't want that. They say, I want my child to have somebody to talk to share their concerns with. I'm like, oh, I'm not a friend. I don't know. There are a lot of therapists that do that though. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I guess there are some kids that might benefit from that. I just think that a lot of the kids that, I guess the populations I've specifically dealt with, mostly autism and some ADHD, but a lot of the kids they're not, verbalization is not their strong skill. So they don't, unless you have a particularly very, very connected therapist who really, really is able to get down deep in there, which, I mean, it's hard. It's hard for, I don't know. I just think that a lot of kids fall through the cracks because they just can't open up. They don't know how to open up. They don't even know how to express what they're feeling inside. They have a very difficult time with that. And so for those kids, I'm like, well, what can you do, besides teaching them how to support themselves and until they are able to open up, and maybe when they're older, they can verbalize what they were going through in their adolescence.
Oh, I just respect so much therapists who work with teenagers.
Right. What age do you work with?
I work with young kids. I work with 2 to 7 for anything. Okay. And then I work with parents whenever they have older children up through teens or even adults. And most of the time, those children have autism.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a lot of times I'll have parents call me and their teens with autism are refusing all treatment. And here in Washington, once a child turns 13, they hold the right to do or not do mental health care. And so it can be pretty hard. I mean, even if the parent held the right, once you're a teenager, you can do health therapy so easy. So yeah.
Make them talk.
Oh yeah, yeah. And to be fair, the parents want to do therapy in a way that is most helpful. And they know that forcing their child into a therapist's office isn't going to be productive.
Exactly.
And, yeah. So I kind of do like this backdoor therapy approach where I'm teaching the parent all about how to manage behavior, setting appropriate boundaries, and even some instruction and development, just kind of understanding what autism is and how that looks on a teenager, because just because you have autism doesn't mean that you're not going to also do teenager things, you know?
Right.
Yeah, it's fun. I love that. That's one of my favorite things to do, actually.
The parent training or parent?
Yeah, I call it parent therapy.
Parent. Okay. I used to, that was my really only therapy thing that I did was parent training and I did a lot of behavioral management, helping them set up behavioral plans. And that was really the only kind of therapy I did. Although, there was some supportive therapy for the parents as well. But yeah, I think teaching the whole family something together is the most effective, especially if it's something like, like mindfulness is really like an everyday thing. You can do in anything. So it's not really it's not really a process, I guess. It's not like a structured thing. It's like a organic, natural. And once you start doing one thing, which is what I do when I teach this to families or parents, is that you start off with one thing a day that comes easily to you. Like mine is my first cup of tea in the morning. My first cup of tea in the morning, I just savor and linger, and I just, and I walk them through how I do it. Like it sets my entire mood for the day. So I'm like, just start off with something simple. Start off with washing dishes or your first cup of coffee or tea or something that you do every day, and then slowly start to expand it. Like see if you can add another activity after a week. And then if you're doing meditation, start off with 5 minutes a day. The important thing is consistency. It doesn't even matter if you're not doing 10 or 20 minutes. Do 5 minutes a day for a week.
I like that even in learning to do mindfulness, you're practicing self-compassion for yourself.
Yes.
Because mindfulness for me is extremely hard. Yeah. Like I don't know, like the whole like do dishes mindfully, like it's so hard. Like I have to put on an audiobook. I have to distract my mind. It's so punishing to do dishes for me. And but to be compassionate with yourself and to allow yourself to do, as much as you can, and to be happy with that, feel successful with that, and to just grow over time, however that looks, that is self-compassion.
Exactly. And that's why I said that the programs I did were all missing something. So I did a separate program on mindfulness, a separate one on self-compassion, separate positive psychology, separate the one I did in Amsterdam. They were all separate programs, but they all had things in there that I thought were so relevant and so crucial to what parents needed to learn. Yeah. And I was looking for something that had all of them, but I guess I just had to create my own to get it all in there.
You did.
Because I don't know, because I guess everybody has different requirements too when they're looking. And my program may not be the fit for anybody. Maybe they just need the self-compassion piece, and that's fine. But go get something. That's my bottom underlining message that I'm getting across. Do something, because if you're like I was 8 years ago, you're drowning and you're floundering, and it's stressful, and I so feel their pain. You don't have to be there. You don't have to be like that. This is not it. That's the bottom line. This is not it. Just don't suffer.
So tell everybody where they can find your online courses.
Oh, so the program is going to be housed on, actually just go to my website. It's drrubia.com. So it's drrabia.com. And I will have the link to get to the program on the front page. Because the program is actually housed on another website, but it links from my main website. So,
okay, perfect.
Yeah,
I'll have the link that she just gave in the show notes, everybody. So if you're at YouTube, go, click the down arrow and go there. But if you're over at enildaclinic.com, it should be just right above this video.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here today, Rubia. And this whole conversation is just so interesting to me. I feel like we are so aligned in the work that we do. And I think the work that you do is super important, of course. So thank you. And thank you for what you're doing for the children and parents out there. I love it, love it, love it.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on. It's been a wonderful conversation, one of many, I hope.
Yeah.
And and your insight has been amazing, by the way. I think you have such such a deep insight into how these parents function and what they need and how you can best help them. So
Thank you. Okay, everybody. So if you're at Enilda Clinic, then get on the email list. And if you're over at YouTube, then hit the like button and subscribe. All right, guys, I will see you next time. Bye.